micronutrients on a low-carb, high-fat diet. So real quick, when we usually talk about low-carb, high-fat diets, we're talking about macronutrients, right? And of course, just to review, macronutrients are our carbohydrates, our proteins, our fats, and actually alcohol is a macronutrient. Just a real quick tidbit, next week I'm going to be talking about alcohol on a low-carb, high-fat diet. But those are our macronutrients. So today we're going to talk about micronutrients. Those don't usually get quite as much mention, but they're important as well. So what's a micronutrient? Well, there's lots of examples. They're vitamins and minerals. So vitamins and minerals, they are important for many different body functionings, and many of them are things that we cannot make ourselves. So we must eat them in our foods or otherwise supplement with them. But before we get to the specifics on vitamins and minerals, I wanted to talk about two important starting points. So starting point number one when it comes to vitamins and minerals is the difference between fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins, because you've probably heard about that before and may not be exactly sure what that means. Well, fat-soluble vitamins are basically vitamins that we can store in our fat, and those are vitamins A, D, E, and K. And fat-soluble vitamins, if we take too many of these, we have a much higher risk of overdosing on them because we can store them. Now, when it comes to water-soluble vitamins, which are everything else, usually those aren't stored in any appreciable amounts, and excess is just eliminated through our urine. So if you're taking too many of those, for the most part, they're just going to give you expensive urine. But not to say you couldn't possibly overdose on some of those. If someone sits down and takes an entire bottle of vitamin B vitamins, they could still have a problem even though they're water soluble. But it is an important concept when we're starting to think about what we're going to put into our diet. So we've got the fat soluble, vitamins A, D, E, and K that we store, and then we've got the water soluble vitamins, which we tend not to store, and that's everything else. Okay, so that's important starting point number one. An important starting point number two is the idea of vitamins and minerals being natural. So people who have heard me talk before know that I absolutely hate that term, because nothing should have to say that it's natural. People should be able to perceive that by looking at it. When you're taking a look at a steak or a nice salad, nobody has to push to tell you that that's a natural food. You are looking at it and you know. But we hear this term natural being shoved around all the time when it comes to vitamins and minerals. This is a natural. This isn't a prescription, it's a natural vitamin. Well, the thing about that is that vitamins and minerals are supposed to come naturally through the foods that we consume. There's nothing natural about taking mega doses of these things. And unfortunately, during my time as a primary care physician, I've seen too many times people actually develop acute hepatitis from all their natural vitamins and minerals that they've been told to take. So we have to be really cautious about that term and understand that just because it says that and is in the vitamin and mineral section at the pharmacy doesn't mean that we should be pushing big doses of these things. So two important concepts as we begin. All right, so then let's talk about vitamins and minerals on a low-carb, high-fat diet. The most important thing is that it is 100% possible to get every single thing you need on a low-carb, high-fat diet from your food. Very important to know. There are certain other diets like vegan where you can't get everything from the food. You must actually supplement with it. Now these days we do have supplementation in forms of vitamins and minerals, and they can be appropriate in some places. But it is very important to understand that this is a whole foods based diet, and every single thing that you need can be gotten in the food that you eat. All right, but it does take some thinking, and there may be some things on a low-carb, high-fat nutrition plan that you may be more susceptible to being lower on. And so what I'd like to do is talk about those today. There's actually been a couple of nice studies done looking at different diet plans and what vitamins and minerals may be at risk for each one. So we've got a little bit of data on what happens when people try to eat a low And for the most part, we're doing pretty good as far as vitamins and minerals goes, but there's a few things that people do need to think a little bit extra about. So what I'd like to do is go through some of the things that the studies had in common. So there was some discrepancies. One study might have found that a certain vitamin or mineral is more deficient than in another study. And that's probably just because the way that people were taught to follow low-carb, high-fat nutrition was slightly different between the studies. But what I want to talk about is the things that seem to pop up in both. And then you can find a copy of these studies as well as a full list of the things that I think everybody should be aware of and watching for when it comes to micronutrients on a low-carb, high-fat nutrition tagged along with this talk today. So please go ahead and take the time to look over that as well. But let's review some of the things that we found more likely to be deficient on a low-carb, high-fat diet. Okay, number one is vitamin C. And probably that doesn't surprise anyone. It's a question that I get all the time. Where are we going to get our vitamin C from? Low-carb, high-fat nutrition generally tends to avoid citrus fruit completely, and that's true. So a couple of things when it comes to vitamin C. First of all, I want to point out one thing. When it came to, let's just say, the Inuit culture, right, the Eskimos, who their traditional diet is essentially just meat. I mean, they rely mostly exclusively on seal meat, some caribou, but meat in general. And what we don't find in that population is vitamin C deficiency. So the idea that you absolutely must have all this citrus fruit or you're going to wind up vitamin C deficient is just simply not true. But it is a micronutrient that's a higher risk on a low-carb, high-fat diet. So where are you going to get your vitamin C from? Well, just because we're not eating grapefruit and oranges doesn't mean we don't use lemon and limes a lot to season all kinds of food. So that's definitely one possibility. But vitamin C can also come from berry fruit, which again can be found in small amounts in a good low-carb, high-fat nutrition plan, and also leafy greens. So you can get plenty of vitamin C, all that you need. But it is something that you want to watch out and make sure you're covering those bases on. Another potential vitamin that could be found to be deficient in a low-carb, high-fat nutrition is a really big surprise. Vitamin C, maybe not so much, but B vitamins. Some of the B vitamins can actually found to be low in a low-carb, high-fat nutrition. And this at first seems incredibly counterintuitive because the first thing people think about is, oh, low-carb, high-fat, Atkins, we eat a lot of meat. Oh, well, you can, but not necessarily everybody does. So again, I have done a little blurb on this in the past that you can be vegetarian and eat low-carb, high-fat. It is totally conducive to that. Many people who like low-carb, high-fat enjoy meat, and if you do, great. But why, if you're someone eating meat, would you possibly be deficient in a B vitamin? Because that's probably the first thing that we think about as a source for B vitamins, and that's true. Meat's a great source for B vitamins. But the interesting thing is, in America, the biggest source of a lot of the B vitamins and folate is actually from the fortification of processed foods. So because in low-carb, high-fat nutrition, we take away all of the processed foods, we're not getting that fortification. Now, if you're eating meat, especially if you're a vegetarian, one who's eating eggs, you've probably covered your bases, but it is something that we want to make sure of. And I want to go back to discuss that fortification of other foods really quickly. Because again, this goes back to this whole natural thing. I mean, we want to be eating a diet plan that doesn't have to be fortified with other vitamins and minerals. I mean, the idea that a large part of our vitamins and minerals on our typical Western diet come from these fortified foods should call us to concern automatically. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are places where fortified foods are appropriate, and certainly in third world countries they can solve a lot of nutrition deficiencies. But here in this country, where food is plentiful for the most part, we really want to be looking for these in our food. That's what's really natural. And again, a couple of years ago, there was some concerns raised about some studies that showed that kids were actually overdosing on some vitamins and minerals because they were relying so much on the fortified cereal for part of their daily food intake. So again, going back to getting these vitamins and minerals from the food we're actually taking in and not finding things that are fortified all the time. Just a thought on that. But B vitamins is definitely something that you want to be thinking about. And of course, meat and eggs is a great source of it. All right, folate, let's talk about that one too. Folate's really important. When we think about this, we think about it's important for pregnancy, and of course that's very much true. But folate is important for other people as well. And folate, again, we don't want to be relying on our fortified foods for this. Where can we get folate? Leafy greens. Leafy greens are great on a low-carb, high-fat diet and can really assure that we're getting plenty of folate. Another nutrient of concern, potentially on a low-carb, high-fat diet would be magnesium. But we find magnesium deficiency actually all over the place in this country, so it is certainly not something that's just on a low-carb, high-fat diet by any stretch of the imagination. It's something that we often recommend to patients in general to be supplementing a little bit of extra magnesium. But where can you get it naturally in the foods that you're just consuming? Well, one great source of magnesium is actually mushrooms. Full-fat yogurt is another good source of magnesium, avocados, and nuts and seeds. So again, magnesium can be one of those things we would consider supplementing with, especially if someone's having leg cramps. That can often be a sign of low magnesium. May want to consider grabbing a little over-the-counter supplementation. But great food sources can be found and are all things that are very friendly on low-carb, high-fat nutrition. All right, last one that I want to talk about that is one that we want to be cautious of is vitamin E. So vitamin E is another one that has been shown to potentially have some deficiencies on a low-carb, high-fat diet. But again, this is also simply solved. What's a great source of vitamin E? Olive oil. So eat your olive oil, okay? Enjoy that monounsaturated fat. And nuts can also be a great source of vitamin E. Again, pushing the idea that we don't need to supplement. This is not one we should have to supplement. This is something that we should be getting from our food. But let's talk a little bit about supplementing now, okay? Because my general recommendation is to just take a multivitamin. One multivitamin is all you need to catch everything except for vitamin D and occasionally magnesium. But the question I get when it comes to vitamin supplementation is always, which vitamin do I want to take? And my answer to that is the one that's on sale at Walmart will be just fine. There is not a magic multivitamin. So anyone who's trying to charge you $100 for some super special multivitamin is just charging you $100. So don't feel compelled to do that. Now when we go to the pharmacy and we're trying to choose our multivitamin, there can be differences. The main difference of concern is your age and your menstrual status and your gender. So of course, vitamins for men, what would make those different? Well, vitamins for men wouldn't contain any extra iron, and that would be good. Men do not need to supplement iron as a general rule. And then when it comes to women, that's where the age difference is going to come into play the most, because premenstrual women are going to be iron supplemented, and postmenopausal women don't need extra iron just like men don't need it. So make sure you choose the category that's right for you, but then again, you can choose the multivitamin at your pharmacy. Now there may be some differences in fillers, but for the most part, that's the biggest thing. So some will actually be gluten-free. We want to always be cautious of anything that's a chew, right? Because they're going to contain sugars. Yes, it's amazing how much sugar kids wind up getting in the morning from their little chewable vitamins. It's quite a shame what we put in there. Okay, so a multivitamin. And then a little extra vitamin D I recommend, because our primary source of vitamin D is the sun, and we are not spending as much time out in it anymore. So in addition to the multivitamin, there's going to be a little bit of vitamin D in there, but I recommend taking a little extra as well. Now this is going to be especially important for people who never go outside in the sun, or for people who live in cold climates in the winter. So we certainly want to make sure during those time periods that we take a little bit of extra vitamin D. Again, we talked about magnesium already, and although this is a fatty acid, I always just want to plug when I'm talking about anything we might or any supplement we we might take extra. Also, for most people, I recommend some extra omega-3s. Now, what's the exception to this? If you are really good about getting fatty fish and seafood in your diet at least 2 times a week, you can forget this. But unless you're getting that consistently, it is a really good idea to supplement with some extra omega-3s too. So again, I hope this cleared up a lot of the questions that we get with micronutrients on a low-carb, high-fat diet. Take-home message here today is that it is possible to get everything you need from your food. Do recommend covering your bases a little bit, and then some vitamins and minerals we talked about today for food for thought that tend to be the ones that are highest at risk on a low-carb, high-fat diet. Make sure you check the supplementary material today.